All right, thanks for joining us today. And I will call the August 10th, 2023 meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board to order. So let's begin with introduction of the commission members.
Tanya Graywind.
Dave Hoganson.
Joanna Johnson.
Conrad Thomas.
Okay. The next item is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
All right, can I get a second?
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The next item is approving the minutes of the July 13th, 2023 meeting.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. The next item is public comment. I don't see anybody here for public comment today. So we'll move on, I guess, to the next.
Have a comment?
No one signed up on the roster, no.
Okay. All right. The next item is department updates, and the chief has some department updates today regarding the selection of a subject matter expert for the Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center work plan.
Thank you. Before I get to that point, just to kind of an overview for the department, follow up to our officer involved critical incident that was about a month ago. It's been a pretty rough month overall for our department and our community. We certainly appreciate the outpouring of support from the community, our board members. Many of you reached out as well. We have done a lot of work internally with our personnel in terms of peer support, chaplaincy, psychological services, one-on-one conversations and things like that. And I think that we are doing very well under the circumstances in terms of taking those next steps forward so that our folks get back into a full mode and back to their public service mission. So I think it really speaks a lot to their character and resiliency as well. And you may have seen earlier this week that both Andrew and Tyler were discharged from the hospital, which is excellent news. And they've got some recovery to do. We don't really know how long that will be, but both have expressed an interest in returning. And first we just want to make sure they get healthy, and then we will accommodate from there. But we look forward to getting them back in action. So I think that's kind of just a basic overview, just to let you know where we're at on that. In terms of the subject matter expert and our special meeting that we had a couple weeks ago, I did speak with the COPS office about the concerns that we had in relative to time to pick a new SME. And I was assured that this would not be a long process. They already had been working on vetting candidates for this particular work project. And this was just July 31st I talked to them. So I'm hoping to hear from them very soon on a potential person to do that, and we can get that work project started.
Okay. Any questions from the board on any of the updates? No. Okay. All right. Well, the next item on the agenda is the Fargo Police Department presentation on the overview of the department hiring process, training program, and recruitment efforts.
All right, good evening. My name is Brandon Kerr. I'm a sergeant in the Training and Development Unit, and I'm joined today by Officer John Novacek. The two of us, in addition to the rest of the Training and Development Unit, are tasked with our department's hiring and recruiting efforts. So that's what we're here to discuss today. When we created this presentation, we really wanted it to follow the pathway to becoming a Fargo police officer. So it really starts with recruitment, and then the hiring process itself followed up by training. And then following that, we'll get into department demographics. So first and foremost, what is our recruiting philosophy? We want access to our recruiters to be as easy as possible. We want to limit as many barriers as we can. And so one way that we have done that is by partnering with an organization called Interview Now. Interview Now is a recruiting platform that relies primarily on text messaging. We know that in today's day and age, the younger generation, that is the way that they are most comfortable communicating in a lot of cases. And so using the Interview Now platform, they're able to reach out to us 24/7, and Interview Now will at least handle portions of the vetting process, I guess you could say, on an automated basis, making sure that they meet all of the minimum requirements. And then once they have met those minimum requirements, they're connected directly to a recruiter. If they don't meet the minimum requirements, that's fine too. We have their information and we can follow up with them and kind of develop a plan so that they can eventually meet those minimum requirements. We want it to be an individualized recruiting experience. So we're trying to steer clear of the canned emails or the minute-long elevator pitch with somebody that's interested in our department. We want to get to know them as a person and figure out what exactly it is about law enforcement that interests them. We're pretty fortunate, being the size of the department that we are, that there's a lot of different opportunities. And so we really get to use that to our advantage when we're recruiting in figuring out what niche within the profession someone is interested in. And then following up with those that have expressed interest in our department. In my time here, I can think of examples where we have had this back and forth with interested parties go on for 2 to 5 years because the timing might not be right for them. They might be working through some things in their personal life. So we're going to continue to reach out to them quarterly, maybe annually, depending upon what's going on, to see, again, what changes they have in their life and is the timing right for them to maybe submit an application at this time. So the recruitment process sometimes can take 2 months and sometimes it can take 5 years, and we're prepared to handle it either way. In addition to meeting with, talking with people over Interview Now, some other ways that we recruit individuals is in-person meetings at our department. That allows us to just get to know somebody on a face-to-face basis. We take down some of those barriers that are brought up by email and phone calls and text messages. We get to answer their questions directly. We get to provide immediate feedback. And we get to show them around our facility. That's another big recruiting plus that we have, is the facility that we have, the gym space that's available, just the indoor garage, as you can imagine, in the winter months. That's a big bonus for a lot of people. So we like to show them around the building. As we're showing them around the building, introducing them to officers, detectives, allowing them to shake hands and have interaction with our officers is a benefit. It's a benefit to us, and it's a benefit to them as well. And then the best recruiting tool that we have by far is ride-alongs. Getting interested parties on ride-alongs. I know each and every one of you have been on several ride-alongs, and so I'm sure you guys are aware of the benefits, and you've hopefully learned a few things from that, and the same applies to our applicants as well. It gives them an opportunity to interact with an officer face-to-face. That's not a recruiter, right? This is just another officer going through his day, seeing what sorts of call for service that he responds to, see our equipment, and generally we find people that go on ride-alongs tend to fare quite a bit better in the hiring process because they have all of those experiences to draw on in an interview setting when they're being asked questions about why they want to be a Fargo police officer, for example. Ultimately, we just want to make people feel recruited, and sought after. You talk to people that have been in law enforcement for 15, 20 years. Many years ago, if there was 2, 3, or 4 job openings, you might get 250 people that would show up in an auditorium like this, and they would test for those 4 positions. We know that that's just not the reality for us today. So again, we have to make them feel sought after. And in fact, it's almost the opposite, where 3 or 4 departments might be competing for a qualified individual. So that's where this recruitment comes into play. How does our outreach work exactly? Well, 3 main things that we do quite regularly. We'll do speaking engagements. We've developed pretty good working relationships with college professors in the area, program coordinators that have allowed us to come into classes and speak with their students for 15 to 20 minutes. And this is where we've gotten the most bang for our buck. I can think of the Class 3, our 2022 Police Academy. 8 of those individuals were from one local institution that allows us to come in and speak to their students. So we kind of get a captive audience, so to speak, for 15, 20 minutes, and we've really benefited from that. And we're very appreciative of those partnerships. Primarily, our recruiting focus is on 2- and 4-year colleges. And when you guys see the minimum requirements, that will make more sense. But as time allows, we do outreach with high schools as well. For example, Davies High School had a career day. So we would go down there and speak to their students for a brief period of time and hopefully plant that seed early. Career fairs. We've done, as it says on the PowerPoint here, approximately 20 of those since 2022. We've gone as far west as Bismarck, as far south as Mankato, Minnesota, as far east as Duluth, Minnesota, and then we've been up to Grand Forks, and just about everywhere in between. If there is a 2- to 4-year institution that puts on a career fair, we make an effort to be there. Those are a little bit more labor intensive, particularly the farther away you go. Typically, we send 2 officers to one of those, and in some cases, it's an overnight trip, and there are registration fees associated with a lot of those career fairs. But we have had success there as well. And then the last thing is media appearances. We're very fortunate. Our media outlets have been great partners. So whenever we are making a big recruiting push, we've been on different morning shows, different radio shows, and the evening news. And it's essentially free advertising, right? We haven't been charged for those spots, and we've had individuals approach us saying that they heard about us on this particular radio station or this particular TV station. So all of these 3 things are in addition to the one-on-one meetings we have. So people can still reach out to us through our website. Maybe they're referred to us by someone or one of our officers. We'll still meet with them individually in addition to these things. So our minimum employment requirements. By the swearing-in date, somebody needs to be 21 years of age or older, and they need to have a minimum of 60 college credits in any educational discipline. 60 college credits is roughly the equivalent of a 2-year degree. And I want to focus on the any educational discipline portion of that bullet point, because a lot of people think to be a police officer, well, I better have a degree in criminal justice or psychology. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. We have hired individuals with backgrounds in engineering, aviation, electrical. We once hired a retired biology professor who wanted to get into law enforcement following his career in education. So we think that makes us a more well-rounded organization, a more thoughtful organization, any educational background. United States citizen or permanent resident status is a requirement that's laid out in state statute. And then fourth bullet point there, state statute lists 13 other requirements. And I'm not going to list all of them off. The statute is there on the PowerPoint, but some examples of that would be you need to have a valid driver's license. You need to be able to lawfully own and carry a firearm. You can't be convicted of a felony. Certain misdemeanor offenses would eliminate you from consideration of being a police officer. So the state outlines several of those in statute. So that's kind of our recruiting philosophy, how all that works. Now we'll get into the hiring process itself. There's really 2 phases to our hiring process, and within each phase there's several steps that officers have to complete. So for the first phase, obviously you would submit an initial application. You can complete that online through governmentjobs.com or joinfargopd.com. Once we receive those applications, a member of training and development would screen that application, make sure that they meet all of the minimum requirements, and then they'd reach out to them by phone, just explaining what the process is going to look like, what the timeline looks like, and when we take that opportunity as well to offer them a ride along. If they don't meet minimum qualifications, we still reach out to them. We're not just wiping our hands of that application because, again, we're big on follow-up and building those relationships long-term. We're going to figure out exactly why it is they don't qualify and then refer them to resources in the area. In most cases, the vast majority of cases, they don't have enough college credits. Well, I went to college briefly 10 years ago. I got 23 credits, and for one reason or another, I didn't finish up. Okay, well, we're very fortunate in Fargo-Moorhead. We have several institutions. Let's get you connected with one of the program coordinators and get you to 60, build you a roadmap to being a Fargo police officer.
Pardon me, Officer Kerr,
Yes.
Can you address something which I'm struggling with in terms of the 60 college credits, and why is that so important as a part of the vetting process?
Sure. That is, I believe that's a part of city ordinance.
Okay.
There is, I guess, it's tough to answer, right? I mean, 60 college credits, it gives an individual 2 more years following high school, giving them that much more life experience. I think it demonstrates to us that they've taken a step and they've sought out further knowledge in a particular topic. They've followed through with that to the tune of 60 college credits. And I think to us that means something in the hiring process. Okay, so after the initial application, assuming that they have met those minimum requirements that we outlined, they would have to complete the written exam. And our written exam is conducted online on computers that we provide to the applicants. It's 100 questions, multiple choice, and they need a 70 or higher to pass that examination. The topics would include reading, writing, mathematics, and human reasoning. Human reasoning is the largest part of that exam. It's 45 of the 100 questions. So, as an example, the applicant would be presented with a particular situation, and then for one question, they would have to decide what they think is the best response to that situation, and then what they think is the worst response to that situation. Those individuals that don't pass that written exam, they're welcome to come back and take it again. The organization that we contract for that exam offers a study guide, so we can get people a copy of that. And in some cases, we have actually brought in applicants and helped them study for it ourselves. So we're not merely just administering this written exam and then, regardless of the results, just wiping our hands of the applicant if they fail it. We've had people take it multiple times, and then maybe the second or third time they're successful. After that written examination, we would move on to the initial panel interview. So there's 2 different interviews. This is the initial one. It's made up of 3 to 5 panelists within the training and development unit. And the emphasis is on behavior-based interview questions. So some examples of behavior-based interview questions would be, tell us about a time where you displayed good leadership skills, or tell us about a time where you made a mistake and what did you learn from that. We're really trying to identify past behavior and, see what they learned from that or how they benefited from that. That's a large portion of that interview. Pass or fail, we're offering feedback to whoever desires it with that interview. We'll oftentimes sit down with them one-on-one after the interview. Most of the time, if people don't pass, this is where they're asking for feedback. So we'll sit down with them one-on-one, go through the questions, offer some advice, some interview coaching based on what we saw, and then give them general advice as to how they could be successful in a similar interview in the future. And then after that initial panel interview, we would then start a background investigation. We use an online platform called Guardian Alliance, and using Guardian Alliance, we would send that applicant a personal history questionnaire made up of 11 sections. So we're talking work history, personal references, places that you've lived, things like that. Once they have completed the personal history questionnaire, our office reviews it one more time, and we're just making sure that before we send this off to a background investigator, there isn't any minimum qualifications that aren't met or any automatic disqualifications. Assuming there's no issues there, we assign that out to a background investigator, and typically we see these background investigations take 2 to 3 weeks to be completed. There's many people that have to be spoken to, and oftentimes that it just takes a little bit. So that investigator would generate a full report, which they would send back to us at the training and development unit, and then we would review it again for any major red flags or automatic disqualifiers that came up since we've had the opportunity to speak to those closest to the applicant. Assuming there's no issues on the background, comes the end of phase 1 of this hiring process, and this is kind of a pivotal moment in the hiring process. It's the chief's interview. So the chief, along with 3 to 4 additional panelists, would interview this applicant a second time. Typically, the panelists are, there might be a couple of captains, division heads. We've seen lieutenants in there, a member of the training and development unit, and then we have a member of human resources in those interviews as well. And at that time, following the interview, the chief and his panel would determine, do we want to extend this individual a conditional offer of employment or not? If they get a conditional offer, then we'll move on to the second phase. If not, then we kind of cycle back to the trend that we've been talking about of, okay, where did we go wrong, and what sort of coaching does this individual need to maybe do better the second time around? So assuming that the chief extends a conditional offer of employment, there's several appointments that the applicants have to take care of. And for the purposes of this presentation, I just laid them out in a random order. These appointments can take place in an order other than what you're seeing on the PowerPoint here. The physical exam would be the first part of that. They're going to meet with City of Fargo Employee Health for 2 separate appointments, and that's really just making sure that the applicant is in healthy condition, they're in a shape that they can perform the duties of a law enforcement officer. And so after those 2 appointments, City of Fargo Employee Health reaches out to Human Resources, and Human Resources tells us the person passed or didn't pass and for what reason they didn't pass. We don't get to review those physicals in great detail other than HR telling us this person's good to go with the physical exam. The second appointment would be the polygraph exam. So we talked about the personal history questionnaire that they fill out during the initial background investigation. We use a third-party polygraphist. She does not work for the city outside of, I guess, what you could call a contract basis. She's not a full-time employee of the city or anything like that. She has her own questionnaire that they fill out as well. We provide her with the personal history questionnaire and her questionnaire. She's able to review those, and then she administers the polygraph examination. It can take up to 2 hours, and that polygraph covers 4 areas using the individual's background. The first one is personal crimes, second one is property crimes, drug offenses, and then work history. Just ensuring that the applicant has been honest with us in those 4 areas. The polygraph results, there's 3 possible. It's truthful, deceptive, or inconclusive. And following that polygraph, the polygraphist completes a report on the questions that the applicant answered during the polygraph, the context surrounding that incident, and then what the ultimate result of that was. Again, truthful, deceptive, or inconclusive. So the training and development would review that polygraph. We'd identify any issues, any red flags, and by this point in the hiring process, since they have a conditional offer, if there's any issues or red flags or things that make us maybe think twice about somebody, we're going to send that up the chain of command with a recommendation, and ultimately they would decide whether or not to continue on with the applicant or rescind that conditional offer of employment. The next appointment would be the psychological examination. So all of our conditional offers go through 2 separate appointments with a clinical psychologist. The first appointment is pretty lengthy, I've been told, about 4 to 5 hours in length, and that is where they're going through a battery of different psychological tests. After they've completed those tests, they have a follow-up appointment with the clinical psychologist where they meet face-to-face, talk about the results. The psychologist is able to address maybe any concerns that they might have, and ultimately they give us a full report in terms of the psychological results, along with a rating of qualified, not qualified, or deferred. The clinical psychologist that we use is third party. And then the last major step would be the drug screen. So within 30 days of their start date as an employee, they have to complete a drug screen. That's obviously pass-fail. I haven't seen anybody fail that in my time doing hiring and recruiting, but every applicant is going through that. Once all of those things are taken care of, then that conditional offer of employment becomes a full job offer. They have their start date with the Fargo Police Department, and they're entering the Fargo Police Academy. Is there any questions on that process up to this point? I know there's quite a few steps to it.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So the background check that you do, is that separate from, like, if somebody is expressing interest in becoming an officer, do you do a check to see if there's a felony conviction right away, or does that come out in the background check?
Well, it could come out a couple different ways. It could come out in the background check. It could also come out during ride-alongs, for example. If an applicant wants to do a ride-along with one of our officers, we're doing a criminal background check on them just to make sure that we're not putting a convicted felon in the front seat of a squad car, with one of our officers or, something like that. So there's a few different ways we could identify that. A lot of times also if we're meeting with somebody at the police station, we're going to check their criminal history before we allow them into the building as well.
Okay.
So,
Okay. And then you have a 21 age limit.
correct.
Is there an upper limit?
There is not an upper limit. We have, in my time here, hired individuals well into their 50s, and even in one case, their early 60s, that I can think of in my 7.5 years here. So those individuals are still, they have to get through the physical examination. They have to meet all the physical requirements that any other officer would, but there's no upper age limit.
Thanks.
I have a question
Sure.
regarding just testing. Is this information available to the public in terms of what the types of questions and that a potential candidate will be tested to?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about the study guide. So anybody taking the test, we can make that study guide available to them. And in that study guide, there is sample questions. This is what you can expect on the test in the mathematics section, the writing section, the human reasoning section. And then it offers some coaching in the study guide. The organization that we work with bills us per test. So the testing material is proprietary. So they're not going to give out the exact test that they're giving to their applicants.
Okay.
I have one question. Again, the age limit of 21, that's a local number, right? I think West Fargo has a different number. I think Grand Forks has a different number. I understand what you would think logically is, they're older, they're more mature, less impulses or whatever. But I mean, is that movable? Is there a reason in particular that Fargo wants the 21 number as opposed to like all these outlining places having a lower number?
Yeah, and I'm not sure as far as West Fargo or Grand Forks exactly what they are. I know the state of North Dakota says that anybody 18 years or older could be a licensed peace officer. So the city has taken that a step farther and said we want our officers to be at least 21 by the time they start. To be honest with you, I don't know if that is rooted in city ordinance or not. It has been a requirement as long as I have worked here to be 21.
Right. It seems like you guys have, trying to recruit and get the department bigger, but that number hasn't moved at all, I don't know.
Well, also, I'm just thinking about the 18. That eliminates the college type of maybe path that the city of Fargo
Right,
includes.
the 60 credit
Yes,
thing,
yes,
yeah.
because I see that as being
A barrier?
a barrier, right?
Yeah, I think the college thing seemed, I get that too. I get why that's in there. But at the same time, I think it can kind of, lower income families, people or single parents or things that make college difficult
Just
to
not
be
even
able
that.
to attend.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I was thinking is like, it kind of eliminates some of your, potential good officers too, that just maybe haven't been able to attend college for whatever reason.
Yeah, and that's a requirement too. I think previously I had mentioned that some of that might be rooted in city ordinance. We'd have to look into that. Some of the things that we do in our hiring process are rooted in ordinance, and some of them is just our practices over time and what human resources has advised us. So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
maybe that's a valid perspective, and
I just know
I
we're
don't
trying
know.
to recruit more people, but there are a few barriers. Do you have any input onto that, Chief or Sergeant Jacobs?
Yeah, and I wouldn't count those as barriers at all. In fact, our recruitment numbers have jumped up. We're very close to being at full staffing as we get ready for our January class. My experience, and it's pretty much a national standard, age of 21 for a lot of reasons. The maturity level, for sure. Look at what we just went through in the last month. We need to have mature candidates, and we spend a lot of time, as Sergeant Kerr said earlier, mentoring those that are younger. And so we've worked with a lot of people at the age of 18, 19, et cetera, as they go to these sessions and these meetings, and they get folks on the right path. Here's what you need to do. Here's the coursework you should take. So these are really measurements, goals that we want people to attain so that when we get them to our department, they're going to be quality law enforcement officers. The other thing to think about in terms of the age is, how does an 18-year-old go and enforce liquor violations? Right? And so there's all kinds of issues with that, and I could tell you a lot of stories over 39 years, but 21 age, I think, is, I would never suggest going any lower than that, just because of the maturity, the opportunity for that person to grow as an individual. What we also see a lot of, and even with the college credits that to consider also, is that a lot of folks come from the military. And we're able to use credits that they took in the military for that school that they took there towards that 60. So it's not that it requires them to go to a, just a regular college and get 60 credits. We have a lot of folks that go into the military, they attend coursework there, and those credits count for that as well. But what we have done to eliminate major barriers, especially from a socioeconomic perspective, is created, number one, our own academy. But number two, this year, for the first time ever, it's a paid academy. So we are vetting these folks and we are hiring them as police recruits. So they're already hired and they're getting paid to go through the academy. Previously, they would not get paid. As you can imagine, most of them have to work to also support themselves. And so how would a lot of people in that situation be able to maintain a job and attend a full-time academy for 13 weeks? And no one else in the state offers that as well. So I think that that's a huge step in terms of what we've done in terms of recruitment. And we do not have a recruitment issue. We've got over 40 people right now that have expressed an interest in our January academy. We have 7 vacancies. So it really comes down to this process. And I think it's important when we talk about the character and competence of our department that we maintain these reasonable standards. And in a lot of these as well, I guess just to let you know that we do take a hard look at a lot of these particular situations, polygraph, psychological, drug screens, and we attempt as much as possible to offer people an opportunity. And sometimes, if there's questions on in a polygraph, perhaps, okay, let's go back and have a follow-up interview and get more details about this. And sometimes that works out and the answers satisfy our concerns. And in some instances, we get more untruthfulness, which means we can't have that person in the department. So each one of these pieces has a different metric to it that we look at, and we do look at very not stringently in terms of, okay, you've got a marijuana arrest, we're not going to hire you. You'll see that in a lot of areas, and we don't necessarily do that either. So we do look at individual circumstances, and we afford all of our applicants full opportunity to address any concerns or issues along the way.
Thank you.
I have a question. Does the department have any targets in terms of women that are being recruited and women to be hired to the force?
Yeah, I think the chief can probably speak to that a little bit in terms of the 30 by 30 initiative.
Sure. Yeah. So are you familiar with the 30 by 30? Did you see her? Okay. So that's a big initiative on that. We currently sit at 29 female sworn personnel, which is 16%, which is about 4% above the national average. So we're, I think, well on our way. I looked before the meeting today, 40% of our last 50 hires, so 20 out of our last 50 hires are female or ethnic or racial minorities. Yeah, so that, I think, is an astronomical number if you think about it. You look at the class that's getting set to graduate this next Tuesday, very diverse group across the board, both racially, ethnically, gender. And I think the 30 by 30, what that does, along with what's been happening here with hiring, is you create environments for diverse people to feel comfortable in. This is a department that they want to apply to because they see that there's others like them in a sense, right, that are working here and are successful. We support that. So I think it's that whole culture piece and laying that groundwork, and the 30 by 30 initiative this kind of helps track that. There's Janelle Krabenhoff, one of our newest lieutenants, is the point of contact for that. So she tracks that data, sends it to, what is it, the Police Institute, National Justice Institute? I forget. But they're kind of the hub of that information. And so that's, I think that's been the really big focus. And it not only does that increase female recruitment, it recruits diverse candidates across the board, is what they're finding.
Okay.
You know, I would like to make a comment as well.
Yep.
When I first got here to the city of Fargo, one of the things that I challenged the chief with was to diversify as much as possible. And I will give him kudos, is that his administration, I'm listening to these numbers, has done a tremendous job thus far. So let's keep it going.
Thanks.
Okay. So once somebody has received that full offer of employment, they start the Fargo Police Academy, which is 13 weeks of classroom instruction along with different practical exercises and hands-on training. Our academy is we are the only municipal law enforcement agency in the state of North Dakota that the Post Board approves to have their own academy. So it's a benefit to us. We get to train people the Fargo way right from day one. Instead of general law enforcement concepts, we're teaching them Fargo-specific law enforcement concepts. Approximately 450 hours is the length of the academy. That's what we're approved for by the Post Board. And throughout the academy, the students are receiving obviously regular coaching, mentoring, and we're very, very big on feedback. Day one, when the applicants walk in there, we tell them that their standing in the academy will not be a mystery, right? If they're underperforming somewhere, we will give them that feedback. We will tell them that there won't be any secrets with that individual student. The other side of that coin, if they're performing very, very well, we're going to provide them with that feedback also. Generally, those one-on-one feedback meetings are probably happening once every maybe 3 to 4 weeks, along with side conversations between classes, that sort of thing. Upon graduation from the Fargo Police Academy, which, by the way, Class 5 will be graduating this Tuesday at 11 o'clock in the commission chambers here, so we're very excited about that. So they're moving on to this next step, which is our field training program. It's a minimum of 16 weeks of on-the-job training where they're paired one-to-one with a training officer. I say minimum because their training could be extended if there are areas where they're perhaps underperforming, and that's normal, that happens. Throughout the training program, they're going to be journaling daily about what they learned on that day, the different experiences they had. It just allows them to reflect on their 10-hour shift. And then their training officer is going to be responding to that journal as well. Twice during the field training program, they're going to go in front of a board of examiners. And a board of examiners is 3 officers within our department that are not involved in that individual's training on a day-to-day basis. They're going to review all of the documentation associated with that training. They're going to listen to the testimony, if you will, of the different training officers that recruit has had, and they're going to make a determination, has this person, there's a midterm evaluation where they're deciding, all right, are they ready to go on to the second portion of the training? And then at the end, they're deciding, is this person ready to go out on their own and take calls, or perhaps do we need to extend their training? That field training program is approximately 650 hours, and that is North Dakota Post-Approved Peace Officer Standards and Training Board. So, sorry, I'll take a step back here. By the time someone graduates the field training program, in addition to the minimum requirements we discussed, they're going to have about 1,100 hours of training before they're ever taking calls for service on their own. Any questions at all on the academy? And also I'd like to, I know the chief already touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to kind of add my own personal experience. Before I worked for the Fargo Police Department, at that time the Fargo Police Department did not have their own academy. So I went to a technical college in the region that offered a law enforcement skills program. It was 10 or 12 weeks in length, and I paid them a tuition. So I paid them somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000, give or take. I also didn't live in that part of the state, so I had to pay for room and board. And the academy is full-time, so I couldn't really work at that time, which those are all significant barriers when you think about individuals wanting to get into law enforcement, but they have a mortgage to pay, they got rent to pay, they got kids, they got to put food on the table. And what the Fargo Police Academy has done is taken all of those barriers out of the equation. The first 3 years we started with, hey, it's going to be an intern-based academy, so you're not going to be paid, but we'll take the tuition out of the equation. So we were saving people approximately $5,000, give or take. And then going into class 4, we put our heads together and it was like, okay, how can we take this another step farther? And it was, well, let's give them a salary too. Let's hire them. So in addition to it being tuition free, you're getting the pay, you're getting the benefits, and you're getting the retirement from day one. And you think about how, I guess just speaking as someone involved in recruiting, that just broadened our ability to recruit, and it broadened the type of people that we could recruit to. So I just wanted to speak to that a little bit.
One quick question, could you speak to mentoring? Is it a requisite that those potential candidates are assigned a mentor, or is this basically someone of a peer looking at it and saying, I like to mentor with this person? How is that done?
We have a formal mentoring program in our department that begins after they graduate from the training program. They're paired up with another officer that maybe has a few more years of experience. And so although you're off training, you're not with your PTO, you will always know, all right, I have this person that I can go to, with any sort of questions I might have, whether it be work related. In some cases, it's about their personal life too. And then those mentors are documenting some of those conversations. They don't have to get into great detail, just so that us as a training and development unit, we can look into that and just make sure that those interactions are taking place and that the mentoring relationship is a positive one.
And I could add something to that as well. In my experience coming up, I was able to lean on my shift mates as well. And I've seen the culture of our department shift even more from when I started to now, that being a routine thing. So just because people come off of the training program and get onto a shift by themselves, they're still very much able to lean not only on those mentors, as Sergeant Kerr mentioned, but also their shift mates. People who have been out there doing it they're able to reach out to them and ask questions. We encourage that. We also encourage them to reach out to training officers on those shifts, as well as their supervisors, and our door in training and development is also open anytime as well.
Thanks.
And one of the things that we just recently started doing as an academy, because the mentor program, like I said, starts after the field training program. So, well, what about the Fargo Police Academy, right? We have partnered with our peer support team, and we just started with this last academy, so we haven't seen maybe the full effects of it yet. But periodically, they've been coming in, bringing lunch for the academy students, and the members of the peer support team are able to have lunch with them, not around instructors necessarily, because we know as instructors, sometimes that relationship dynamic is just a little bit different, because it's on us to hold them accountable to the standards of the academy and the standards of the profession, whereas the peer support team, they can just come in and have friendly conversation with them, right, and offer them lunch. So that's something that in the academy we look forward to doing a little bit more regularly.
I have a question on, it kind of backs up a little bit to the written exam. Do you ever do any sort of just looking at it from an education lens, any modifications when you have individuals that maybe have like a test anxiety or anything like that? Do you do anything that to help with some of those pieces when they're taking certain exams?
Since we have started this written examination in its current iteration, I haven't encountered a situation like that, at least where someone has made me aware of any test anxiety. But that's a valid question, and truthfully, it's not something that I've thought about. So that could be something where we reach out to the company that provides us with the tests and see what ideas they have, because I do get it. I mean, sometimes those multiple choice examinations, when you got a job on the line, could that stress somebody out, and could we help them with that?
It might even be something you can ask prior to them taking the test, is if they've ever been on an IEP or anything like that in school. That might be helpful for them, because I mean, something as simple as reading it out loud could help.
Absolutely. And one thing that I just thought of as we were sitting here talking is, typically those tests, we do it in like groups of 10. So we'll have a room like this where computers are set up across the room and 10 people can take the test. I think they get up to 3 hours to complete it. But we have in certain cases brought individuals to take the test one-on-one, where it's just one of us and them taking the test. They don't have to worry or stress about 9 other people around them. So that might also be an option for us, and something that we've kind of already been doing.
Yeah, but speaking from an academic background and so forth, what about the vetting process of the biases? Because many individuals, although they may have the 60 credit hours, they may come from a different social class or a different social status of something of that nature. And I believe, in fact, that's something that needs to be looked into, because you may be stopping an individual that could do everything else, and they just can't pass the test. So I think that might be something just to consider.
Yeah, and one thing I should add too is that all of our hiring process is done in conjunction with City of Fargo Human Resources to make sure that it's consistent with state law, federal law, city policy, city ordinance. For example, last Academy go-around, we wanted to change our interview questions, and we wanted to change the scoring on that a little bit, just to mix things up as far as the questions go. We do have people that apply multiple times. And so before we make any changes to that process, we're routing that through human resources just to make sure that from their perspective, everything is all good and fair. So the testing program too that we use currently was something that came to our agency through City of Fargo Human Resources as well.
Is there a limit on the number of times an applicant can apply if they don't pass or don't make it through a certain part of it?
The written examination, no. The short answer to your question is no, there really isn't. There has been times where maybe somebody wasn't successful in the process, and we bring them in for that interview feedback. We're doing some coaching with them. Maybe some of our feedback to them is, hey, maybe go get some work experience in private security or working in the correctional field. And sometimes those individuals will want to apply the very next go around, and of course we're not going to tell them that they can't do that, but sometimes it is a conversation of, hey, have you had enough time to maybe make some of the changes, to implement some of this feedback, to get some of that work experience to be successful this go around? Because we're not in the business of seeing people fail every time they go through this process. That's not what we want.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll get into demographics here. As the chief said, currently among our sworn police officers, there's 179 of them. We're authorized 186. Of the 179, 16% of them are female, and 84% are male. I can add some additional information just on some previous academies. I have this data going back to 2020. Summer of 2022, Class 3 was our largest academy class. There was 22 total graduates. 23% of those individuals were female. In January, that class was 20% female, and in May, that class was 20% female as well. So that's kind of just a look into perhaps, what is coming or the direction that we're headed. Okay. As far as race, currently our department is, as you guys can see, 91.3% white, 4.4% black, 1.1% Hispanic, 1.6% Native American, and 1.6% are other races. So what's interesting about this is the 8.7% that you guys are seeing that make up races other than white, that is 16 individuals. And 75% of those individuals have been hired in the last 3 years since we have started the Fargo Police Academy. So you talk about maybe reducing some of those barriers. We've really seen a change in this makeup in the last 3 years since we've taken that tuition out of the equation and offered a salary. Do these demographics bring up any questions at all? Okay. That's basically what we have for you guys here today. As the chief mentioned, we are already recruiting for Academy Class 6, which will be starting in January. We've had just above 40 applications. Officer Novacek has put a lot of time into vetting those applications and reaching out to those people and building a relationship. So now that Academy Class 5 is wrapping up on the 15th, we're going to kind of switch modes from training and instruction to now it's full-time recruiting, and we'll start hitting the road with career fairs and getting into college classes as colleges start back up. But just as a reminder, people can apply with us at joinfargopd.com or using that QR code.
I just want to add as well, those 41 applicants are coming in without any real recruiting efforts. Obviously, Interview Now is available, but we haven't really started that push yet. We haven't started the campaign for, doing those career fairs, speaking at colleges, that type of thing. And so to be where we're at now is very encouraging. So.
One other piece before you wrap up, which is, you said you only had 30 minutes, so that was really good.
Was that about 30 minutes?
No, it was about 60. You did pretty good. Is an opportunity for board members to participate on the interview panel, on the chief's interview panel. So that will probably present itself around October or November-ish as we prepare for that January class. So I will, email, reach out to see if we've got an interested board member that wants to sit on some of those panels. Just, kind of heads up that sometimes we are doing late afternoon into the evening interviews to get these things accomplished, for either because we're tied up or the people can't make it till after their work hours. And so we try to avoid weekends, but we've done some weekends just to try and get those in. So it might be a little bit seem hectic in terms of what the schedule is, but I think it's a great opportunity for you to see the insight part of this and see what we see in these applicants as they come forward and do their interview.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for the presentation. Any other business before we close the meeting? No. Okay. Well, hearing none, this meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board will stand adjourned, and our next meeting is scheduled for September 14th at 5 p.m.